So in here, we have a clean working status. So if we check that quickly once again, you see no issues in here. This means our last commit contains these two files. These are two tracked files we have in our Git project here. Very important to keep this in mind for this stage. Now let's say you apply a change to one of these tracked files, for example to our first initial commit text file here, and let's say we have something like text is no longer needed, like this. Save this, and now you say, I want to get rid of this unstaged change in a tracked file. That's exactly the case we have right here. So what you can do now is you can again run git status, of course. And as you see, we have changes not staged for the commit. We have modified a tracked file in here. To undo this change would simply mean to go back to the status of the latest commit, so of the head basically in our current branch, right? We talked about the head and all these branches topics in the last lectures. Now the cool thing is we have exactly this option. We can run git and now the checkout command, which you already know. And now we want to refer to a specific branch and a specific commit. Now the cool thing is that the branch we refer to is our current branch, therefore we can tell Git that we don't refer to any specific branch in here by adding the two dashes. This would simply mean that there is no specific branch I want to apply this checkout command to, it's just the current branch I'm working on, so you can also omit this here, it's just optional to be more explicit. And now in this branch, I want to refer to the head, so to the latest commit of what? Well, of this initial commit text file. If we do that, you see the change is suddenly gone. Isn't that cool? Well, and actually, you can also apply this to all your tracked files that you have in your current branch. For example, if we add some random text right here, so let's say random1, and here we have random2 maybe, so very creative again. And if we now again run git checkout, as I said, double dashes can be added, but can also be omitted. And now you add the dot. This simply means go back to the head status of all commits of all tracked files I have in my current branch. If you do so, you see suddenly this change is gone right here and right there. And if we check git status once again, you see we have nothing to commit. The working tree is clean. So let's clear this. So checkout is the traditional way to revert unstaged changes in tracked files. Nothing wrong about this. But if you remember back what we talked about in branches, then we had this Git 2.2.3 update where additional commands were added to not use checkout for basically everything. The same thing is true for this undoing unstaged changes thing. Here we also have a new command which we can use from this version on, and this command is called git restore. Now, to show you this, we again have to add some text in here, maybe again text we don't need, like this. And now we have the same status, so you know how this works in the meanwhile. So we have this modified file, and now we can run git restore like this. Git restore will basically do exactly the same thing that git checkout and then the file name or the dot to revert changes in all unstaged files. So it will do the same thing, but it's just a bit more explicit here. So we can again use either the dot for all files, or as we want to refer to a specific file, we can restore the initial commit.txt file. And as you can see up here, this worked perfectly. We now again have a clean status here, nothing to commit, and our change was reverted. So these are the two alternatives you have when it comes to unstaged changes in tracked files. But what if you added a new file to your working directory? Let's say this is just a test.txt file, so a file you don't actually need. And now you say, well, I have this file in here. So with git status, we can check this, of course. And now you want to delete this file. You remember in the last lecture, we had the situation that we have a file which was part of our commit, which is tracked, and then it was deleted. Now we have an untracked file we want to get rid of. We also have a helpful command to do so, and this command is called git clean, and now we only have to specify what should be cleaned in here, and we do this with -d. This means we want to clean, so we want to delete in the end all untracked directories and files, so not all files and directories, only the untracked ones. And before we do that, we can add an n to list all these entries we would delete in here, so let's do this. And now you see this command would remove our test.txt file. So basically our untracked file we have in here. So make sure to always run this command first to see what you're going to delete. And if you're not sure that, yes, this is the file that should be deleted, then you can run git clean -d and now F. F stands for force here. So you force Git to really do that without asking any further questions. If we do that, you see our test.txt file was deleted. And let's clear this once again. So we now saw how we can delete files from our working directory and how we can get rid of unstaged changes. The next step now is undoing staged changes. So let's say we again made a change to our first commit right here, for example. You can also apply this logic though for new files, so both is possible in here. So we say some new amazing content here in our project, and let's save this. Now, as you know, in our status, we have unstaged changes, so we can do, yes, please add the changes I made to my initial commit, text file here. With that in our status, we see that this file has changes which are ready to be committed. And now you say, actually not what I want in here. And up here, you already get the information on how to undo this, or how to unstage this change. That's again only available from Git 2.23 on, so we'll cover this in a few minutes. But the old traditional way to undo stage changes requires two commands, actually. Why is this the case? Well, if you think back about the unstaged situation we had for tracked files, then we simply used git checkout and then the file name, so initial commit.txt in our case. We can try this here. But you see, we updated 0 paths from the index. What this simply means is that before, with the unstaged changes, we could simply go back to the initial state. But here we have the problem that we have staged changes. This means our index, our staging area, was updated. Therefore, simply checking out the head, the latest commit of our file, is not working here. Before we can do this, we first have to bring back this latest commit, this latest stage of the file, and copy it into our staging area. Now, what sounds a bit complex here can be done with a simple command in Git here. And this command is called git reset. Now, git reset will be covered in more detail in a few minutes in this course. At this stage, when applying git reset to a specific file name, in this case to our initial commit text file, git reset simply copies the latest stage of this file, so the stage in the head of our current branch, into the staging area. What does this mean for our case? Well, if I copy the latest committed change of a file into the staging area, then this file is basically no longer modified, right? Because this latest change was committed, so which change would I stage at this point? Let's try this now by adding git reset. So now we get the confirmation that our changes were unstaged. We still have our, well, new content here in the working directory though, but now we can of course simply use our git checkout command once again and now refer to our initial commit, text file. And with this, we are now back in our initial state and we undid this staged change. So keep this in mind, that's an important difference. For unstaged changes, you can just use checkout with the corresponding file name to get back the status. But if you added the file to the staging area already, then you first have to use git reset to bring back the latest status in the head to the staging area, and then you can check out this initial state. So this is one way how to undo such staged changes. Now, as before, with Git 2.23, some new commands were introduced, and one of these commands is the so-called restore command, which basically helps us to do exactly the same thing. It helps us to restore an earlier stage of the project. In this case, we want to restore the version prior to this staged changes. Restore in the end works exactly as reset did, so let's maybe go to the second commit now and let's add some random text in here. Let's save this. Now we will add these changes of this file to our staging area. So with git status You can see we have these changes here, we have this modified file, and you actually get the information about git restore also in here in our git status. So that's actually also the command you can use if you're using the named git versions. Basically, git restore works the same way as git reset does. It's again just a new command to be a bit more explicit about what you want to do in here. You can use both commands though. So we will use git restore in this case. We want to restore stage changes, so dash dash staged. And now we refer to our second commit .text file. We do that. We don't see a lot of changes, but if we now check out our second commit once again, you see, we again updated one path from the index, simply meaning we unstaged this change at this point. And if you run our git status command once again, you see our working tree is clean here. We have nothing to commit, so the stage changed was unstaged. Now, we use these reset and restore commands, and as I said, restore is the more explicit one at this stage, because reset is actually used in a slightly different context. So let's explore reset now in a bit more detail. Before we do that, let's clear our terminal here.